Hi, my name is Courtney Hicks, and this is my story about how I died and went to heaven. On March 19th of this year, I was really struggling with my depression, and I had decided that I was going to take my own life. I gathered up about 100 pills, and I got in my car and I drove about an hour and a half away from my house. I took all of my medication, and I was by myself for about 4 to 5 hours. During that time, I was having seizures and losing my eyesight. It was very scary. I was praying to Jesus the whole time. After about 5 hours, my fiance found me due to getting some help because he got a ride. And he was able to get in my car because I unlocked the door. And shortly after that, I ended up losing my vision and I was unable to speak. The firefighters ended up showing up shortly after that, and it took a long time for the ambulance to get there. In the meantime, I was slowly losing my breath and going in and out of consciousness. It was a very scary time for me, and at one point there was something telling me to just calm down and not be scared anymore. So I listened to that thought. I remember hearing my body do the death rattle twice. At one point, I ended up dying, and I know that I died because I could no longer hear the people around me, and I went straight into heaven, and all I could see was the clouds around me, and then I immediately came back into my body, and I could see nothing at all. I remember my very last breath and my mouth opening, and then all of a sudden, I felt something very strong pull on my chest. And at the same time, I just remember feeling like I was dying, and I lifted up from my body, and my spirit hovered above my body, and I could see myself. I was laying on the ground with nobody else around me in the fetal position. I remembered looking at myself and just knowing that I had died. It was very weird, and I was probably about 5 feet off of the ground. Shortly after that, I ended up going into this very weird tunnel. It was very psychedelic, kind of like being on mushrooms. I did not like it. There was very bright colors around me. It looked like a galaxy, and it was moving very fast. You had no control of where you were, but my consciousness never stopped. I was thinking the whole time. And at the end of the tube, I guess I got out at some point, and it was very black. Everything around me was black. And so I stood there, and I heard a voice, and the voice told me to open the door. And I just thought, that's so crazy, because there's nothing around and I don't see a door. And then it said it again, open the door. So I reached my hand out and I opened a door that I did not see. And when I opened the door, there was heaven. And I walked in. I remember walking in and looking around, and it was like a giant waiting room full of clouds. And I looked at my body because I couldn't believe that this was real, and I had to make sure that I was real and I was really seeing this. And I could still see my body. It looked a little different. It's kind of hard to explain. I was still wearing the same clothes. I was wearing this shirt right here, my Coca-Cola shirt. I went to heaven in this shirt. And I remember after thinking about it and realizing this was real, I needed to start looking around. So as I began to look around, I looked off into the distance and I could see a gate. And it didn't seem like it was that far away from me. And so I began to walk towards it. And as I walked towards it, it began to get a little further and further away from me. So at that point, I started to run towards this gold gate. And all it did was get further and further away. I couldn't go anywhere near it, and it was very upsetting to me. because everybody knows what's on the other side of the gate. And so I kneeled down on the ground. When I kneeled down on the ground, I prayed in my head, asking Jesus where he was at, because I was in his domain and I couldn't find him, and I felt very lost and scared and hopeless, and I just didn't understand what was happening because I had died, and I didn't understand why I couldn't go in the gate. You know, how could you be in heaven and not be allowed to go in the gate, especially if you can see it? The next thing I know, I'm looking down, kneeling, and I can see Jesus's feet show up right in front of me. He was wearing rope sandals like you would see at Earthbound. And as I was slowly looking up, and you could see his robe. He had a very white, pure satin robe, and it went all the way down to his ankles. And I just slowly looked up, and he had very long sleeves from the robe, and you could see his beard. He had a very short beard, and he had long, not too long of brown hair. It was about like right here. But his face was the sun. I could not see his face. It was so bright. So after me realizing who he was, you know, he's definitely Jesus. There's no question about it. I knew I had to ask him a few questions. So I asked him if I could get into the gate. And his immediate answer was no. He pointed at me with his finger like this, and he told me no. At that point, I thought that he was going to send me to hell. I couldn't believe that I was just told no by Jesus. I asked him why not, and he told me that my family needed me. In that very moment, he allowed me to hear my fiance's voice screaming my name, because on earth he was crying for me. I asked Jesus to please let me in anyways, and he told me that I had to go back now. And in that very moment, I was sent back to earth, and I was put back into my body, and I began to hear the EMS all around me again. Eventually, I ended up in an ambulance, and I went on a ventilator for 2 days. When I woke up from being on the ventilator, I still could not see. I was completely blind. I wrote on a writing pad, and I asked why I was blind, and they told me it was because I had OD'd. I knew at that point that they couldn't help me have my vision back, and the only person that could help me was Jesus, and at this point, I knew that he was real. So I cried out to God with my mouth closed because I had a ventilator in, and I asked him to please let me have my sight back, because if you're going to make me live, I would at least like to see, please. And in that very moment, he allowed me to slowly have tunnel vision, and I was able to see. By the end of that day, I had regained all of my sight. I don't know if you stuck around and heard my story, but I want you to know that this is real, and that Jesus is real, and he's there for you. So even if you don't believe in him, he's listening to you, and you can always pray to him, and he will help you.